here with Jonathan Taylor, who has a website that is especially interesting. Tell us about it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm the founder and publisher at voiceformalestudents.com. It is the leading website for educational equity for men and boys. I really work publishing a lot of news and commentary on the website, but I also work to create a lot of resources for parents, educators, students, advocates, basically anyone who is involved in advancing the conversation on educational equity for men and boys.
And how did you get interested in this? And how did you get signed up with Voice for Men in this conference?
Well, I'm a former higher education instructor through Texas A&M University, and so when I was an instructor of composition and argumentation in that system, I came across some instances of bias against men and boys, and I also came across numerous instances in which the scholarship on gender issues was lacking in intellectual rigor, perhaps to put it charitably. And I began to, this piqued my intrigue, and then I studied it a little bit more, and then I realized that these were not localized incidences, but really part of a national or really international trends that were working against the goals of educational equity, gender equity in education, and doing great harm to men and boys.
And what are some of the issues? Can you name us the three top issues you think that men and boys are facing in education today?
Well, one of the chief issues, particularly in higher education, would be retention issues, particularly graduation rates. Here in the United States, when it comes to associates, bachelor's, master's, doctorates, if you just look at the trends of graduation rates over the last 40 years, there has been a staggering nosedive in the amount of degrees that have been conferred upon male students, especially in associate's degrees and master's degrees, most especially. So,
why do you think boys don't want to go to college anymore, men?
Well, I think perhaps it may be that they feel pressured to enter into the workforce immediately because there is that old male provider role that may be working against them. Also, the reality is that we just don't have a lot of resources for male students who are entering college. We have, books upon books of programs for women, for integration, for assistance, for empowerment, for financial aid, whereas the reality is that this just doesn't exist in anywhere near the same degree for men and boys, despite the fact that they are doing relative to women rather poorly in higher education.
Now, what about minority boys? Are there more scholarships and things for them, or do they also suffer from some of these problems? We're talking about the bias.
They too suffer from some of these bias issues. There tend to be more resources available for male students of color, but really the problem that we run into is that people in higher education, really the culture of higher education, especially in the humanities, they only really tend to recognize men and boys as a group as deserving of help or compassion in as much as they fit into some of these other groups that they actually do kind of tend to have compassion and concern for, such as, gay men, black men, Latino men, low-income men. And that's not to say that they don't need our help too. They certainly do. But the reality is that men and boys as a group, when you look at the problems that distinctively affect them, they just aren't getting the attention that they need proportionate to the issues.
And what do you think people can do to help? How would we change this?
Well, one of the great ways is to, right now, just create the conversation, help create the conversation, because there are not enough people talking about this issue. There are not enough people researching this issue, and we really have a decent amount of data. But what we really need are people who have the courage to create that conversation from a perspective, a new conversation on educational equity, which includes a perspective of compassion for men and boys as a group. That is a critical element which we really need to develop more of. And I have a lot of resources, a lot of information, a lot of activism tools at the website of voiceformalestudents.com if people would like to avail themselves of that opportunity and get involved in the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.